Good evening, everybody. The hour being after 5:30, I'd like to call the Walpole School Building Committee meeting for Tuesday, February 11th, 2025 to order. Any members of the public wishing to question or comment can email us at mmortali@walpole.k12.ma.us or middleschoolproject@walpole.k12.ma.us. Our next order of business is approval of meeting minutes. Do we have any questions or comments about the minutes? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve. Motion from Mr. Fisher. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Dr. Kenny. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Raise your hands. Opposed, no. Abstained? It is a vote. Our next order of business is the project status update. Kate, over to you.
We'll pass this one along to Joel.
Sure. So not a lot of activity out there right now, demobilized for the winter in terms of the site. We do have some subcontractors lined up for February break. We're down to about 10 punch list items in the building. Hopefully we'll wrap those up over February break. And aiming to be back as soon as the weather breaks, hopefully in March, to finish up that last area of landscaping and punch list. And that's about it in terms of a construction update.
The work to complete list is on the following page, so this is just a breakout of items that are outstanding with the expected completion dates. So, from the base contract, so things that Fontaine will be working on, this spring. Anything you wanna mention? I think it's pretty high level, a lot of ASI work.
Yeah, the only thing that was like base scope for the site that's not done yet is the bullpen work at the varsity baseball field. But other than that, it's things that kind of came up post occupancy that we're gonna get back in there and do.
All right, so we do want to talk through the paving and fields scope of work. So we have looked closely at these numbers. I think all of you received the memo from Jim last week that came out, kind of summarizing what we're going to discuss today. So the paving of the sidewalks and select surfaces, that number has been fine-tuned by the DPW. And that roadway kind of safety improvements work came to $1,450,000. And then the field final estimate, which includes some coordination with the DPW for the parking along East Street. And then also includes a $34,000 ad service for TAPA's construction administration to oversee that field's work. So that total for the field area, the field number was $2,022,000, and then adding that into the DPW number and the construction administration ad service comes to $2,131,000. So combined, both of those projects come to $3,581,000, which is listed on the memo. So we'll talk through the fields piece.
Always a break in the conversation. I just want to recognize Cam DeRocher, who's Don, new member of the committee.
Welcome, Cam. Thank you.
Jumping right in the deep end.
Yeah.
Sure, let's zoom in at the bottom, let's kind of start at the bottom, or look at the legend first. And let's zoom in at the middle, and then, yeah. So the legend in the middle kind of gives the breakdown of the different parts that we have here. Anything that's in blue is kind of what's in Fontaine's base bid. The kind of pink magenta is what the Walpole DPW scope is. And then the yellow is the ad alternate, and then red is what is currently not in contract.
I'm sorry, it was not in contract?
It's not in contract.
Thank you.
So that is kind of what we pulled out as part of the VE effort to try to bring the costs back down. So I can kind of go through on the screen kind of what is what here. We've got some civil work happening here. There's some, well, let's start at the street. Basically the street work, which is pink, is the paving the granite curbing, and any of the, kind of the line striping, that is the scope of work that the DPW is covering. And then kind of from the curb and sidewalk over is where the transition kind of takes place to what work is covered with Fontaine. So I'm just gonna kind of go through the list of what's, I think you guys have this in your package already. What's in the base bid from Fontaine is the 5-foot or 4-foot chain link fence that goes all along East Street, and there's a gate for field access so that the DPW can get on the fields. We've got removable bollards at the fence opening, kind of right at the main entry. That is, if you ever need vehicle entrance into that location. I think Kate's gonna zoom in so you guys can see a little bit better. So kind of right in that main opening, there's removable bollards, so if you ever need to park, you know, we talked about a mobile bathroom unit, or if emergency vehicle ever needs to get in there, there's bollards there you can remove to get into that space. There are bullpens, so there's one bullpen at the varsity softball, which is new, one bullpen at the varsity softball new, one new at JV baseball, and then varsity baseball, which is already owned and that is installed for the base bid in the original middle school package. There's one new varsity batting cage for the softball field. The varsity baseball field already has one installed for the base package of the middle school. There are portable bleachers for 49 seats. There's one for the varsity softball field and another for the JV baseball field. And there's a concrete pad associated with each of those bleachers underneath them. There are covered dugouts with benches and integrated storage shed. There's one at the varsity softball field, one at JV baseball, and then there's a shared dugout between the varsity softball field and JV baseball field. There is no shed in that location. Again, there's concrete pads and footings at all of these dugouts as well so that they can be installed and mounted correctly. We also have 2 enclosed on-deck circles, which are kind of screened in for everyone's protection. I know this came up during our meetings that there's people been swinging the bat kind of behind the backstop with kids walking around, everything else was a danger, so we enclosed those areas. We have a new 20-foot high backstop with chain link and then a hood that kind of reaches out and over. There's one of those at the varsity softball field and one at the JV baseball field as well. We're reusing most of the existing sports netting poles and putting up new sports netting. And then we're also extending the sports netting further down on the varsity or JV baseball field, further down towards the East Street entrance to again help protect the street and eliminate more balls from passing over the street into the neighboring properties. We have 2 new scoreboards. There's one at the varsity softball field and one at the varsity baseball field. We also have a 6-foot high enclosure around the concrete pad for the portable toilets. The toilets are not in contract. And then we have the asphalt paving and walkways. Again, this kind of makes the full, we talked about this as well, was the running loop. So we've got new paving down along East Street, which kind of makes the loop. The loop actually goes back up and ties all the way around. It's kind of the green dashed line with this, I think there's circles on that, going all the way around. So we still have the running loop. The other walking path that we had talked about previously is no longer in contract. We took that out as part of the VE effort, but we do still have the loop for the walkers and runners to take part for the different sports and stuff for the school. Then jumping over to the infrastructure, we've got conduits for the power and for fiber to the press box locations. And again, that's conduit only with a handhold each of the press box locations. We've got power and lights for the dugout and shed, power at the batting cage for the pitching machine. Pitching machine's not in contract. We've got power to the new scoreboards. We've got the infiltration trench drains and piping that connect to the existing catch basin along East Street. There's very little work for civil besides the drainage and kind of the drainage retention area. The bio retention basin that's there currently is being expanded. And we also have new access basin, catch basin, and associated piping. And then finally, we're modifying the existing spillway that was kind of put in for the middle field, or for the middle school project originally, is being kind of expanded and reworked to accommodate this scope of work. And then again, we kind of touched on the DPW scope already, which is the granite curbing, the asphalt sidewalks, the asphalt sidewalk along East Street, and also all the parking and paving along the roadway. The bid alternate is an 8x12 prefabricated press box. There's one at the varsity softball and one at the varsity baseball, along with the concrete pads associated for those as well. And then the power of the press boxes and fiber of the press boxes is also part of that bid alternate. And then what is not in contract is the items that kind of we discussed and pulled out as part of the VE effort, were the picnic tables and the stabilized stone dust surfacing that goes underneath them, trees and mulch, the trash receptacles, the bike rack, and then, as we just discussed, the asphalt walkway kind of along the existing varsity baseball field. And if we did that work, we also had to shift the existing fencing to install that walkway and shift the bullpen from the original design that we had in the middle school package. And then finally, the last thing that I had on the list here was not in contract was the portable audio systems that we had for the press boxes as well. I think I covered everything, but if anyone has any questions.
Can we just talk through the visuals?
Sure. So up top is kind of just an example of the scoreboards that we were talking about. Again, there's two of them, one at varsity baseball and one at varsity softball. Again, multi-use, they can be used for softball, baseball, soccer, anything else that's going on the fields. The next image below is kind of an image from another project of a similar kind of dugout structure that we've spec'd here. Again, there's benches underneath it. It's got a covered roof, and then there's a small kind of storage shed at the end of each one, except for the one that is shared between the two playing fields. And then below that is an image of the portable bleachers. The image next to that is the batting cage. That's the actual image of the batting cage that's currently installed at the middle school. And we're going to be installing a similar one here for the varsity softball field. Again, that's all the base bid stuff. And then the image to the right is the bid alternate, and that is for the prefab press boxes that kind of go behind the backstop at the varsity softball and then also the varsity baseball field.
So 2 of those?
Two of them, correct.
Good question.
Yep, Ben, go right ahead.
The scoreboards, are they hardwired with to the controller, or is it the wireless kind? Or
I think we have the wireless kind of as well. I
Wireless.
think you have the option for both, but
Yeah.
it is wireless.
Okay, thank you.
Jen?
The pathway, you said you took out the walking pathway, but you left in the running pathway. Can you explain that a bit more?
It's all one and the same. So before we kind of added that walkway behind the kind of dugout at the varsity baseball field. So we took that out as part of the VE package, but you still have a loop, kind of what we discussed with Kerry and everything else is for the sports teams and for people to be able to walk. So instead of staying below in the lower part of the hill, you're going back up the sidewalk and everything and back up and around. So you still have the walking loop, we just didn't add the lower portion in that we discussed previously.
Okay, and that lower portion, why would you need it if you have the green portion that makes a loop?
You don't really need it, that's kind of why we pulled it out as part of the VE. That was kind of added for convenience, so you wouldn't have to go back up the hill.
Okay, but a person who's not super athletic, I'm thinking if the field's over on 1A, right? Like people are walking all the time. Is an average person gonna be able to use this loop?
Yes, because as you go up, it's ADA compliant,
Okay,
so you should be able to get up there.
okay.
So it meets all the slope requirements and everything else.
All right, then my other question is that the press boxes that are in the bid alternate, does that mean that if somehow things come in, it's automatically going back in?
I think you guys would have to vote and decide on that in the end.
Okay,
If I could speak to that, so.
Mm-hmm.
So the press boxes came in, 2 press boxes, 8 by 12, $527,000.
Wow.
That's about, what did I figure, about $3,000 a square foot, I think I asked you guys if I was calculating that the right way, which is crazy.
yeah,
So part of the proposal was outlined in the memo I dated February 4th is, I think we'll do this the Walpole way and go to either the shed place in Millis or find the one in Plainville that's still open. Get a couple sheds. I'm budgeting, I figure about $25,000 a shed. I think that's pretty high. I talked to Jimmy in the Parks Department, DPW, and just kind of more or less, there's a little subsection that I just said, let's have the DPW be responsible for. So that includes benches, the trash receptacles, because I think the quote we got for the trash receptacles was around $7,000. If we have DPW do it in-house, I think it's like, I think I had 1,500 or something in there for it, so. The benches and the 3 picnic tables too, so there's like a $75,000 allowance as part of this request to just make it so DPW will be responsible for those items.
This isn't something we can just hold off on and push to the future. If we put it in the bid alternate, it's getting
mean,
done.
They confirmed the price at $527. I don't ever see two sheds being built,
Yeah.
$527.
But I guess, I mean, your new estimate of doing it the Walpole way, is that gonna go forward, or?
If this is approved tonight, that's included in the number.
Okay.
That was included instead of the 500,000?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Yep, Dino,
sorry.
right ahead. Yep.
Because I was involved earlier on in the process, I wanted to get some sort of historical context about this scope of work. Was it talked about as the design of the project was underway? Was it scope of work that people wanted to do and at that time, planned for it? Was it part of Tepe's original design work and then removed? Just a little historical context about its scope and about its history.
I could start, I guess. Originally, we were not touching the playing fields at all as part of this design. Again, when Fontaine came in, I think the first thing we kind of did was we discussed shipping the soils off-site and the cost that was associated if we kept soils on site. So that was kind of the first time we were touching the playing fields when we took the, what was it? JV. Yeah, JV, and took that over and got some money back to the project instead of shipping the soil off-site, then bring it back. So that was kind of the only scope of work that was in the base bid, which was kind of discussed after the fact, when we got these guys on board and their subs came in and offered that cost back to us if you guys wanted to. Otherwise, we were not touching, there was no playing field scope involved.
And we, the town of Walpole, made a decision not to have any scope of work there. Is that fair to say? Is that?
Yes.
At the
And-
beginning of the project.
And we, the town of Walpole, whoever was designing or determining what the program requirements were, looked at maybe those fields, and I know this is ancient, because this probably goes back at least 2 or 3 years, Jim, if I'm not.
5 or 6.
5 or 6.
Start at 6, not counting.
And people sort of said, maybe we don't need to do it at that time, and let's not include it in the scope of work, and we'll just, have it the way it is.
Yeah, at that time, we just wanted to get a middle school passed. We weren't thinking about playing fields. We were desperate to get the project passed, so dugouts was the last thing on in mind.
And we struggled a lot just to get the project on and under
Yeah.
budget, so.
Yeah.
Oh, so this is something different, and maybe this is what I want to try to understand. I mean, was it talked about something that we should consider doing, but then there was sort of a number tossed to it, and people said, that's too big a number, we may not be able to get the middle school done, let's remove it from scope of work. That's a different thing than saying, we don't need it.
So on my end, at the beginning of the project, no, really, these items that are addressed up on the board here really weren't included. You're right, because we were in the budget shopping mode. We were getting it down. I mean, we even talked about getting rid of the blue. About September 2023, school administration through Bridget and Mike worked with the athletic department to come up with some ideas as to how could we improve the fields area there. Kids who play there day in and day out, the youth groups that may use it on the weekends, and then, of course, the high school groups that have their afternoon practices, and I think freshmen still play games up there for soccer and varsity baseball and softball and JV baseball. So we started talking about it back in September 2023, and then it's kind of gone from there.
Right. And I know Jim, if I remember your memo correctly, the full scope of this field work came in significantly higher than what was originally planned, like 3.4 or something like.
Big number,
Yeah.
3-4, yeah, that sounds about right.
And so there was an effort on the part of school committee or school administration to, I'm sorry, I couldn't quite understand from your summary, what was taken out to go from the 3.4, what did we do away with?
So we took out the picnic tables and the stone dust that was there. We took out all the trees and the mulch, basically the plantings, the trash receptacles, bike rack, that asphalt walkway, kind of that we took, the lower loop that we took out, the portable audio systems, and basically the power and fiber and press boxes that moved to the bid alternate.
Got it. And that was the 500,000, so that's like half of that. Wow.
Half of it was in the buildings.
Because I was trying to mentally add all this up, and until Jim mentioned the number for the press boxes, I'm going like, how could it be $1 million? So that's how we got to the million, right?
And then we kind of fine-tuned the design as we went along as well, so.
Got it. And just, the estimate was done by Kate, who?
The estimate was.
Was it you? Was it Fontaine?
Subcontractors that are on the project.
Got it.
Pricing the drawings for us as they went.
So to their credit, also, I questioned it, you know, and I said, this is crazy. They actually went out, got a third party to come in, Heimlich, who've done, I know their downs,
Make sure that those fields are restored to the way they were originally, which is basically netting, some fencing. They do want to go ahead, and I agree with that they should do something about the running path, because that's going to be something that the kids are looking for and will be using. But to go ahead and project $1.5 million for basically what's a mile of sidewalks and roadways, and over $2 million for fields that aren't really relevant to what happens at the middle school program. We have a responsibility to restore them to the condition that they were before, but not to put $2.1 million worth of improvements in it. I just can't see this right now. We have an opportunity right now to save a significant amount of money, return it to the town for other capital needs as they come down the road. We worked really hard over the last 4 or 5 years to bring the price in and to control the prices and not to go crazy on change orders. And now what we're doing is, now we've got some extra money, so let's go spend it. Well, I can't agree with that.
Well, we don't have the money. That money would be borrowed, is my understanding. I mean, no, it's not sitting in a bank account, is it?
it is.
It's already. Has it been borrowed?
We've already borrowed. Recently
Yeah.
borrowed by the select board.
Yeah.
They signed off on it a couple weeks ago.
Okay, so it is in the bank. But it's money that's got to be paid back, excuse me, Mark.
Yep, yes.
And, okay.
Jen, you had a hand a moment ago?
Yeah, so I'm gonna follow up on that first, even though that wasn't my question. The select board voted to borrow additional money a couple weeks ago in association with this?
Specifically for this project.
For the project, so when, if I could, just, Mark, if that's all right.
Oh, go right ahead, Ben, yep.
7 million. So kind of from 30,000 feet, when we borrow for infrastructure projects, and if you think of it a little bit like swim lanes, right? We have all these projects in various stages of planning and construction and afterward and so forth. And so we come into it with the plan and the estimate, and that of course has to go to a town meeting, and the RTMs vote on it and approve a value. And then we move forward into construction, and we have other projects going on at the same time. We go through construction. Best case scenario, we're left with a sum of money at the end, whether it's our contingencies that we don't use, or savings, or what have you, scope changes. And that money then can, at the end, either be used, you know, on that project as is, you know, proposed here, or like if this $3 million is voted to be used for this, then there would still be 1.5 million remaining. That 1.5 million would then go back into the pot, so to speak. It would go back to the beginning of the process. And the select board and school committee and town administrator's office would then need to decide on what to use that money for. So whether it was, and we're going a little far afield, I realize, but, you know, whether that's then to go to the elementary schools or to go to, I know public safety and fire have talked about a new satellite fire facility, or the high school project that's ongoing, whatever the case may be, that's a whole different discussion that then takes place about that $1.5 million. And how that then gets reintegrated, brought back to town meeting then votes again and says, no, take it to this other location. So when it comes to the select board and you say, well, are we gonna borrow the last $7 million of the 100 million that town meeting approved? I guess there is a world in which the select board might say, we're not gonna borrow it at all. But I think that's a really hard sell, because it's money that's been set aside for a project. There's more work to go here, even beyond this proposed scope. And so the select board is gonna borrow that money. It's gonna be used to finish the project in the spring and in the fall. It gets closed out with MSBA. We get whatever remains of our money back from the MSBA, the matching funds, and then that value then goes on, like I described, into other projects conceivably. Now, you wouldn't necessarily be, let's say, we're going to what, spring town meeting? It probably wouldn't be a fall town meeting this year. It would more likely be that any monies that aren't used on this project would be available spring town meeting of next year, or probably even more likely fall town meeting of next year is when we'd want to appropriate those funds. Maybe it could be sooner, I don't know. So that's kind of like the big picture view on how that money gets appropriated. And so that 7 million is, some of it's gonna be used for work that's already been approved, contract work, and then some of it's gonna be used conceivably for this.
But the money we borrowed, it was through an override for a specific project for the middle school.
Correct.
And you're saying if there's 1.5 million at the end, it could
Yes.
get allocated to other things? I
It's up to
guess I don't
town, it's up to
understand.
town meeting, yeah.
Town meeting can choose to reallocate money that was borrowed.
So for example, and
Okay,
I can
that was
talk, we can talk about this more after as well, or if anybody,
Yeah.
perversely, I like talking about this stuff, it's very interesting. So like, think about the high school, right?
like we did for
Real
the high
quick,
school.
right? Remember when we stacked up all that money that was left over from even, I think, the library and other sources? That was some money that then town meeting reallocated to the high school project. It would be the same type of thing. Whatever future project that is, the town administrator's office, the schools, the select board would find a target project, would recommend reallocating it to that project, and then it would go before town meeting.
Okay. And if it doesn't get reallocated, and I know we're gonna get asked this question, which is why I'm asking, if it doesn't get reallocated, is there a way to return it? No.
No.
Once it's been,
Not that I know.
So, if I could, we went through this with the library.
Yep.
We had about 900,000 left over at the end of that project. That project stayed on the books for probably 3 to 5 years. It was reallocated eventually to the police station, for the construction of the police station. Through a vote of the select board, agreed to place it on the warrant. Town meeting voted to fund it as part of the multiple funding sources. So as I mentioned in the memo here, we have authorization for this project to borrow approximately $77 million. Prior to the select board signing off on it, we borrowed $70 million. We had to go out and borrow another $7 million to make the cash floating. That money, the town has to float that money one way or another because our bills are due on it. So that's how we went out borrow, why and how we went out
Yeah,
borrow
that's a
the
better
$7 million.
clarification.
So let's say in the end, if you decide to do nothing, no action taken on this, we will have a surplus in this project of $5 million. We went through this with the library and we explored ways, how can we give it back to the taxpayer? Once it's borrowed, you can't really give it back. You go to town meeting, you can reappropriate it towards a project that's similar size and scope. That's why we were able to use it for the police station, same life expectancy and everything. So my thought on this one is 3 to 5 years, there's probably gonna be multiple competing interests for this thing between, Cam reminded me today that he needs about $500,000 for the Boyden School. I know OPR and Fisher have some work done to it, where the town meeting recently appropriated $300,000 to study an additional fire station, a new fire station in East Walpole or near Route 1. So I know in 3 to 5 years, there's gonna be competing interests for that remaining money. But I also know that these funds are here available for these two specific aspects of this project. It's within the scope. I've spoken to legal counsel. This committee, and I have a legal opinion specifically saying, this committee has the authority to do this, and no other committee. I actually asked if the select board could do it, and the answer was no, because of the way the article is worded. So, that's why we're here.
Yeah, and I had one other, go ahead and ask the second part of your question, and then maybe I'll jump in again.
well, the second part's not related to this discussion, so.
All right,
I
go ahead.
It had to do with the scoreboards and just whether or not, like, you took the press box out and did it the Walpole way. If the scoreboards, like, if there's I don't know how much they came in exactly. Is there a Walpole way to do that, like, for the fields, to reduce the price on that? Like, if there's another organization in town that may have money, for instance?
I don't know, I know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
What scoreboard we worked on.
I know, it took us a while to get that one, so.
I'm just wondering if, because, public bidding process, things get to be more expensive, so just a thought.
Yeah.
Jack? Jack?
What's that?
So, Jim made a good point, and Ben actually started that point. The funds left over from the library, there were funds we were able to reallocate to jumpstart, police, fire, COA, kind of that, that stream of work that we did back a few years ago. And, Ben talked about the high school as well. Jim, what was there, like 13 different funding sources of leftover capital projects?
For the high school?
For the high school.
Well,
It was a
biggest
big
one I've
list.
ever done. It might be even more than that.
But I mean, the point is, it's $5 million today that we're gonna be able to, reuse to whatever that big capital project is 5 years from now, or it's only gonna be $1.5 million. The funds are gonna be needed, and I just think it's a better use. Yeah, it's gonna take time to reallocate it to something else that's needed, but I just don't see the fields as part of the scope of this project, or, the right way to spend the money now.
Jack?
Go ahead, Ben.
I'll go after you, Jack, go ahead.
Just to kind of follow on for a little bit, I think we can, the mechanics of how we go ahead and reallocate the money are interesting, and I'd like to sit down and have a cup of coffee with Ben sometime and talk through the details of it, but not tonight. I think the reality is that it can be reallocated. And the decision we're making right now is, are we gonna reallocate 1.5, which is the projected surplus, with full funding on this package, or are we gonna reallocate $5 million for things that for things that were not identified in the original scope? Now, there are some things that have to get done in there. We have to fix the sidewalks in the street immediately around the school, absolutely. But do we have to go all the way on Washington Street from High Plains Street all the way down to Short Street, a half a mile? Is that part of the school project legitimately? I don't see that. And so we could talk about this sort of stuff, but if we take a step back and look at what we're actually spending the money for, it's things that are a big increase in scope, that have very little to do with the educational objectives of the middle school program. And that's what's been our driving force from day one. So I think that this is a little bit over the top, and I think we should stick with what we absolutely need to do, not spend $3.5 million on sidewalks, streets, and varsity playing fields. That's my opinion. Now, one of the things that I'm a little concerned about, when Jim says that this committee can make that decision, that's true. But I'd like to know what the school committee thinks. And I'd like to hear what the school committee has to say about spending $3.5 million on fields and sidewalks, or would they prefer to go ahead and spend it for future capital needs as they come down the road?
What's the school committee vote on it? You guys haven't voted yet?
Don't need to.
But it's like a $3 million change order. You guys must have a position on it.
Hasn't come up.
Not at all.
Ben, you had a?
Sure. So I guess, and I hear what Jack is saying here, I have a little different take on this in terms of like an infrastructure project for the town. I think it's important that we use this money that is left over because of obviously this wonderful project that we've had here. Not to say that there wasn't a lot of good fortune that went into it, but certainly Fontaine and Tape, Vertex folks, as well as all of us here, it's really a job well done and a testament to that job that we have this money left over. I think that we ought to be able to put that money towards as many uses as possible. And so, in doing so, we kind of have this idea, and this is, I'm the representative of the select board. I don't speak for all the select board members, but it's this idea of complete projects, okay? So we don't come in necessarily and just draw a square on the map and say, this is the school, and we build everything inside of there, and anything that happens outside is too bad and so long, and we'll see you next time. It's really this idea of taking all of the stakeholders that are involved, and everybody doesn't get everything they want. I mean, we don't take $5 million and save it in the bank for a later project, but we also don't use all $5 million, right? And so we have these stakeholders. We have the DPW saying that we need repairs to the roads and that we have this ability to extend the sidewalks. We've all heard from the residents in the area who are concerned with safety, who want their kids walking to school in better conditions. And so we can really, I think, show some goodwill towards those folks, towards the residents, the people that have come before us, talked about safety, the people that have come before us, talking about kids biking or walking. And I think that engenders some goodwill and some positive attitude. And those stakeholders do get to see something from this project, right? They don't turn around and say, well, there's that great $120 million school, and look at this, tore up sidewalk that isn't gonna be replaced for 5 years. Similarly with the fields, I know that 2 million number is large, but the athletic department, and I know the schools and the school administrators, or the school administration is in favor of this. They're big stakeholders will, because they were displaced while we were doing all this work. And so some for multiple seasons, and so that was more of a scheduling snafu and a scheduling issue and a inconvenience more than anything. And so I'm not here to say that $2 million is payment for that, but when those folks then come in and are able to use a facility that doesn't have rusty chain link fences and it doesn't have a patchwork ball screen on East Street, which is, if you've seen it, it looks like absolute hell. And so if you're a coach or a player, then I think that you'll appreciate that and you'll say, okay, the town, when we do these projects and as a taxpayer, when we put this money forward, we know that everyone's gonna be able to see the benefit of it, right? It's not just a select small group of people, just the teachers and the administrators. And again, I think that really then creates this positive atmosphere in the town and engenders this support from residents. If you're sitting watching your kid at a ball field and there's this rusty chain link fence in front of you and you're like, wow, I guess we spent $100 million on that school, but we couldn't replace this fence. And so, by meeting all the stakeholders halfway, I'm sure that the baseball coaches, I'm sure that the soccer coaches, I'm sure that everybody else would like to see more for the fields. I'm sure that local residents, and we've heard it, right? They want to see sidewalks on both sides of Washington Street, right? We're only improving some of the sidewalks. I'm sure the DPW would like to get a much bigger jump on the roadways going down 10, 15, 20 years from now, but they're only getting a piece of that. And as we know, a lot of people would like to see $5 million put towards future projects, down the road 3 to 5 years. And we can still put money towards that. That 1.5 million is no drop in the bucket. So, I think it's a reasoned approach. It's a lot of money. I don't deny that. But I think in doing so, we can really go to the town and the taxpayers and town meeting and say, listen, we've delivered a complete project for everybody here. Everybody's gotten something out of this. And I think that gives everybody good momentum and a positive momentum into the next project, and everyone can feel good about this. Not, oh, the town is coming to do a project in my neighborhood. It's, oh, the town's coming to do a project in my neighborhood. This is going to be a good thing. So I'd like to see this pass. I think it's a reasonable proposal, and I think it does let us responsibly plan for the future.
Anybody else? Nancy?
I appreciate what both Ben and Jack were saying, and I'm talking just as an individual, because we haven't discussed it at school committee. We're in a really tight budget situation, and I think that we have to prioritize. We don't need a press box. We don't have staff to run a press box. So we have 2 scoreboards up there already. So could we just keep the scoreboards that are there? I went up just this afternoon to take a look. I definitely want it to be a completed, finished project, and I think that that is what Jack is talking about, that we can have. To me, the fence on East Street looks relatively new. Now, granted, I haven't been going to those fields as much as I used to, but I think we have to finish off the project. I'm having a hard time with the 3.5 million, though. I definitely don't think we should be planning for press boxes. They get used occasionally up at the high school, but you need staff for it, and we don't have it. So that's just my own bias. I have a couple of little questions if we're gonna go down the road of voting on the 3.5, but I think it's a lot of money. And I definitely am more concerned about, we don't have enough money to put equipment into the high school, and we know that already. So I think we have to prioritize, and dugouts, would be replacing benches that the JV and the softball players use right now. The bleachers would be replacing a set of bleachers that are there already. Maybe they're not as nice, but they're there. Yeah, I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean,
Jen?
at this point, but I want to say something about that real quick, because at this point, we can say, well, we need to save this money for a rainy day. And then 5 years from now, we can turn around and say, well, it's purely theoretical at this point, right? There could be 5 new buildings downtown built in the next 5 years, and we have a whole new stream of revenue, and we have no budget crunch, and we could be sitting on that $3.5 million, looking back at this and being like, I wish we could have done that project then, because now instead of $3.5 million, it's gonna cost 4.5, and we're not gonna do it. So I just wanna caution a little bit about thinking in these hypotheticals about what we could use the money for in the future, because that's a long way down the road, and it's just as likely that if we turn around and actually don't need the money and wish we had used it on something reasonable now.
Jen, you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the fields. The middle school doesn't use those fields. People were asking about, I'd like to hear from Carrie and Bridget.
Sure. So for me, I wasn't involved in the original design, but I can definitely speak on how close to 900 students would use the field, and I do see it as an extension of the school day, because beyond athletics, a well-maintained and high-quality field is definitely essential to the overall well-being and experience of our students day-to-day. And so we do use it right now for well, we're looking to get more intramural sports up and running now that we are fully open, but we do use it for all of our PE classes, including our wellness program. We use it day to day for recess or sports. We're hoping to continue using it for even more things, including like team building activities and field days. And we really see it of encouraging inclusivity and fostering a sense of pride in the school community. So we do use it daily for, right now at least, when the snow's on the ground, PE, recess, field day, and those different opportunities.
And we're looking to build our athletic programs at the middle school. Like every middle school's got, just about has an athletic program. We're getting there. Started with volleyball, now we want to get cross-country, and hopefully we can do the softball and baseball for our kiddos.
Okay, so when it was stated earlier that these are varsity fields for the high school, that's actually not accurate then, based upon what you're saying?
We both, right? High
Yes,
school
but
and
there
middle
would
school.
be a use for the middle school. Okay, and you're talking about expanding intramurals and expanding sports at the middle school. Can you elaborate on that a little, Bridget? I mean, I've heard about it, but I feel like people here should
Yeah,
understand the vision behind
Yeah,
this
that was,
middle
we
school.
started, we're starting a little bit with volleyball, right? And then we've had somebody just work with the different middle schools to find out what they have. And I think when we first got into this, I was surprised at the number of middle schools that have middle school athletic programs. Just with cross country, found out that, from Bill, that Westwood has one, went out to see it. Trying to look and see what we could do, soccer, lacrosse, what could we do? The rec department has some of these programs. Hate to take away from the rec department, but if we can build it in the middle school, we're gonna have it at the middle school level.
The rec department could use it in the summer.
And the rec department could use it.
Well, currently, middle school kids use it through like the soccer program and all that stuff too, right? The soccer pays to use it.
I have a question.
Could I ask, is there anything in this scope that affects middle school phys ed, though?
It impacts
Like their programming,
Yeah.
wellness? No, not that I've,
phys ed, you mean,
like what they're doing right now, no,
Track.
in a negative way.
yeah.
The running
Oh, you
track?
mean
In a
like,
ne-
I feel
in a
like
I thought you meant in a
negative-
negative way.
The track,
In a
yes.
negative way or a positive way?
Well, in terms of, you've mentioned that they're not just varsity fields, right? They're used by the middle school kids. The loop, I think, finishing the
Cross-country,
loop.
Definitely.
Anything?
Play soccer,
Yeah, I'm
is there a
sure.
unit? We have a lot of phys ed units.
No, but I mean, in this scope, in this $3 million, is there anything besides the loop that affects phys ed?
No, I would
No.
just say overall.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jeff, you had a question?
Yeah, so,
For all sense of-
one of the
Yeah.
questions I have is the two estimates we have, the roadway and safety improvements, 1.45
Correct.
million, and the field work, the 2.131. Do these estimates stand on their own? Like, they're mutually exclusive, they don't, we could do one versus the other?
So I guess to answer your question about the roads is they're really intertwined, especially this parking aspect of it. You know, if, Kate, could you pull that roadway improvements map up? So I was talking to Rick about this today. A lot of the damage that was done on, most specifically East Street, and a little bit on Washington Street was a direct result of the middle school, the tearing up of it. And you want to take one and pass it down. Patrick went out there today, took some pictures up there. Kate, sorry, you didn't get this in your PowerPoint. So, as part of a water project, we require the water department and all contractors to dig up the road to repair what they fix. We're not looking for that out of this, but we're just simply looking to repair East Street and Washington Street as far as the road improvements. The sidewalk areas, if you walk East Street, you can see they're there. These kids are gonna be using that, the parents are gonna be using it to get to and from school. A lot of Carrie told me more kids ride bikes than they ever had before. We're looking to improve the walkways there. You know, Jack, you and I had talked, you said, why are we bothering with 3 dead-end streets? That's a good question, but they're directly across from the middle school. If you wanted to pick and choose, all 3 of those streets, I asked Rick to get me the number, those little side streets there. Beth, Holly, and Edward, they total about $115,000. If the committee wanted to whittle away on some money, that would be one, but, you know, it's $30,000 a road, roughly, and 45 for Beth, and 40 for Holly. I don't know what direction you folks are going in, but I just wanted to offer that up there. So, as far as the parking on East Street, it is directly related to the fields, because the work that TAP A did basically intertwined the work that Carl and Rick and Joe and Chris over there are gonna be doing this summer, if this vote actually happens. We'll be administering the construction administrators on this. We have bids in hand because our contractor agreed to stick on for a second year. So that parking is certainly intertwined to it.
So the 22 parking spots shows as part of the scope of the $1.45 million.
Yes.
That's true, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because I guess, from my standpoint, I'm asking, I'd like this committee to vote, take 2 separate votes, one on the asphalt and paving and the roadway improvements, and one on the field scope.
As the town administrator, I respectfully disagree with you. I don't
That's
think
fine.
it's a good idea to pit school versus town, or one project against another.
It's not.
It's all related.
I get that, but I'm on Nancy's page where I think the scope of the fields is too high. I mean, I always had concerns about the fields in general. And when we saw the original numbers, I was shocked. You know, I said to myself, if you guys get this down to like under $1 million, I might be able to support it. I see stuff in there that just, it's too much. I mean, improve the fields, make them better than what they are. You know, additional scope beyond just putting it back from where you guys stored dirt, I get that. But this scope is more than I'm willing to support for the field work. Roadways improvements, I've got a different opinion than some on whether or not we should do that, so, I mean, that's where I'm at.
So I think Jeff makes a good point there in terms of how we're gonna move forward. So I'm not trying to short circuit any further discussion, but I would make a motion to vote on the full package of the 3-some-odd million as defined in this letter. To move that question, and we can have that question further debate if people think so, and then we can go from that point depending on what happens. If people are willing to
Second.
do that.
I
Subject
think
to,
you did 2 things there. Are you moving the question, or are you making a
no,
motion? What are you doing?
no, I made a motion. In a second.
Could you repeat your motion again?
A motion to approve the 3-some-odd million as set forth in the proposal letter.
And we have a second. Do we have any further discussion?
Yes.
Jack?
I'm going to approach this from a slightly different perspective. As we've been talking, I've been hearing different things from different people, and I'm very concerned that the school committee has not weighed in on this. We haven't asked you to date to approve any change order, because all the change orders have been pretty much in scope and low cost. We're talking about something that's got a very significant increase in scope and a huge increase in cost, that could, and if it wasn't spent, it could go ahead and be used for other capital needs of the school department going down the road. So I would like to hear from the school committee what their thought on this with a vote as to whether they are approved, whether they would be willing to, whether they want to do this or not. So my recommendation, from Robert's Rules of Order, I think we can do this, Mark, but you have to judge. I would like to make a motion to table this until the school committee has come back with a discussion and a vote on what they think about this proposal, because it's out of scope, and it's a $3.5 million increase.
So I'm not a parliamentarian. Yeah, we have a motion and a second and further discussion. I don't think we can,
I think you can make a motion to table. I think, and once you can table the motion
On that motion.
I
to
think
a subsequent meeting.
I think you gotta vote on it, once there's a motion on this.
I think we have a motion and a second and further discussion, but I don't think we have a substitute motion necessarily, unless it's, hasn't been seconded, or unless it's already been voted down.
No, to table means to take no further action. So you have a valid motion that's been seconded to vote on this. And I'm suggesting that we table this until pending action from the school committee. And I believe you can do that under Robert's Rules of Order, because how else can you do it? You can't vote, you can't go ahead and make a motion to table something unless there's a motion on the floor. So,
Respectfully, I disagree, and I think Patrick's looking it up, Jeff's looking it up, but I just know if this was town meeting, and with Dan all the years, there's always, the motion's on the floor, it was second, and you got, I think if it fails, yeah, certainly you're able to
well, if it
make
fails,
a motion to
what's the table?
I would also just mention too, that Fontaine's on a pretty tight schedule that, I don't know, Joel, we're
Relevant.
kind of talking about that, but we've been talking about this for months. And I appreciate your
Well-
perspective, Jack.
Can I ask a
Well-
question, another question?
Yeah, Jack? So this is part of further discussion, right?
Out of
So, yeah.
further discussion. You guys said the punch list is almost done, probably finish up in February, right? After that, you guys pretty much done, right?
We need
Middle
the
school
growing
project.
season to be back there.
What's that?
We need the growing season to be
Yeah.
back there, so our contract with the town right now runs through the end of April. So the way that this is priced right now
Through the end of April?
would need to happen in the spring.
Okay.
And then there's, if it happened later, we wouldn't be there typically, so that would bring the cost up to be additional supervision.
So Mark, we'd be supporting this right now theoretically through April as far as school building committee with this additional work. We're now talking, so when? When's this work looking to be done?
Starting the end of March.
Through when?
Hoping to be done in July.
Starting March.
Starting March?
That's why they need to know, because it, just timing-wise, to get to your point,
Just
Jack.
curious.
Yeah, and
I know school vacation's next week. A lot of people aren't gonna be here. Then that takes us out to, for last weekend in February. It's logistically, it's not gonna work, and I see Bridget shaking her head. Like, we need to know one way or another. I understand you wanna vote of the school committee, but we need to know. So,
I would add, as part of further discussion, as a member of the school committee, I even, before the meeting even started, I wrote sidewalks, loop for walkers, and parking were the three things that I favored as being sort of specific to the school. That's just my thought.
Table, I don't know what that means.
Can I make a comment?
Jean?
Some of you in this room may remember the high school project, the high school project, which was, 20-some-odd years ago? We successfully, after multiple opportunities, passed an override to renovate and expand the high school. When that process began, we had to cut. And I think from the time that renovation and expansion was filled, we had significant regret that we were not able to do what we had originally wanted to do. And some of you may have gone to the high school while it was under construction. I know my children were there during part of it. And I feel at this point, if we have an opportunity to really create something that is of value to the entire community, and I look at even the 1A fields. We have seniors out there, we have senior citizens, and we have children, we have so many people utilizing that facility that I see the middle school area to be another opportunity for many of the community members. And I think we really should take advantage of that at this point.
Any other discussion? I would add, though, that this wasn't cut.
It wasn't cut,
Right.
I know that, but what I'm saying is the experience we've had in Walpole is being extremely frugal and then regretting it later.
Do we have I won't say a ruling, but any opinions as to whether we can have a motion, a second, and then a motion to table?
Once you get a second, you gotta take a vote on it.
Right, once you get a second, you have to vote on it. Do we have any further discussion?
I would respectfully disagree with that, because when you table something, you have to table an active motion. So that active motion means that it's been made and seconded. So you have an active motion right now. That's when it's appropriate to go ahead and table it. But if I'm overruled, I'm overruled.
My interpretation, not to argue with you.
Like you are.
Take it outside after, guys.
We're gonna have to talk
The
outside.
table needs to be a motion in and of itself, but you already got a motion on the floor, so. The table needs to be a motion, and you would need a second of that. There's already a motion and a second on the floor.
All right, I'm going to rule that we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the main motion, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
We have a count here. Those opposed?
Who are we missing?
You only have 14.
9 to 5, I think. So we have a 9 to 5. Vote is 9 to 5. The motion passes. Next on our agenda,
Could I interrupt for a second?
yes, Jack.
It's time being 6:30, this is when the PBC is supposed to start. So if there's anybody outside waiting, would you just tell them we're gonna be a little bit delayed? Or tell them to come in. Come in and,
So next on our agenda is to vote the vendor invoice package for January of 2025.
So this is just the Vertex Tape, some FF&E items on here, and Fontaine. So just flipping through the invoices quickly. Standard Vertex Tape. The Fontaine rec, is for $389,692. They are currently 98% complete with their contract. We have an updated budget that is included in the vendor invoice package, where we are with reimbursements from the MSBA, and we are looking for a vote for the January vendor invoice package for $692,381.36.
Any questions or comments?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have a second? And a second. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Opposed? Abstained? It is a vote. So next, Kate, MSBA discussion?
We haven't heard much from the MSBA. We're up to date with all the paperwork that we've submitted. Just a reminder that when we hit that 95% of the estimated grant for reimbursement, they hold the final 5%. We're currently at 91.74%, so we're not quite at that 95% threshold yet. So the town will continue to get reimbursements. And then other business, open discussion.
Anybody? Next. Our next meeting is March 18th at 5:30. Any questions or comments about that?
Is that also in person?
Good question. Will that be in person, or did we just do this one in person?
We did this in person so we could have an open discussion about the
Right.
fields and paving. I think we were planning on going back to the hybrid model, but
Yeah.
that's open for discussion if anyone feels differently.
Anybody feel differently about hybrid, going back to hybrid for the next meeting?
I would appreciate it, but it's
Me
not
too.
necessary just for me.
Yep. I think we could do hybrid, then we'll see what the state has to say about all this
This
thereafter.
is so much
I
better.
like seeing
mean,
you.
I'm
Not that I don't
sorry.
like
I'm really sorry. This is nice, because usually it's Mark and I sitting in this room with Kate,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
it.
If there's more hours in the day, I would agree with you.
Exactly.
Depends how many.
All right, so we'll do hybrid for the next meeting, very good. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, second. We have a motion from Jeff, a second from Ben. All in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed? It is a vote. Thanks, everybody.